So, after a momentous win in the US Open Cup semifinals, Nico Estévez was, in a word, ebullient. He was very happy. In fact, so happy that he asked Colby Gordon from the Austin American Statesman late in his part of the press conference if Colby had jumped up and down to celebrate the goal.
We know Colby well enough to say that he's not much of a jumping up and down kind of guy.
He is not.
Um, like a
none of us in the press corps are really, I don't think, right? Who's the most likely to jump up and down in the press corps? Maybe Laura?
Maybe Laura. Yeah, I don't know. But Colby very much feels like a firm business-like handshake kind of level of celebration. That's what feels more appropriate with him.
An assertive yes.
An assertive yes. Yes, okay. All right, that's interesting.
I will confess to doing a little bit of a fist pump, and then I put my hand back on the keyboard and kept writing because there were all these kind of unknowns in my story that I still had to fill in because I was not sure what was going to happen. I thought we were going to penalty kicks like most everybody. We did not, clearly. Thank you, CJ Fodry, for saving us that.
Yeah, that was a pretty momentous thing to watch happen on my TV because the replay only includes the first 93 minutes of the game. It doesn't include the extra time. So if you didn't see it live, Paramount Plus won't let you see the rest of it.
Wow.
That is definitely not a thing that I am jumping up and down about.
Emergency podcast. Verde did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hurry up, shut up, hurry up, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. The emergency that October 1st, we're going to be hosting our first final ever at Q2 Stadium. Austin FC, of course, will face Nashville SC. Of course, there are other games too. If you have not been to Q2 in a while, you probably have not because there have not been Austin home games. I get to return there on Sunday as well for a date with Seattle Sounders FC. Leagues Cup champions against US Open Cup finalists. Moisés, the pageantry, the wonder.
I feel vindicated in so many directions. But most prominently, the soccer gods knew that this was the best U.S. Open Cup final option there could have been. The duel of the two music cities, the Bachelorette Derby, as some have dubbed it.
That's good.
The thing to me is that, and we'll get into all this, but you wrote up the post-match press conference, post-match conversations with players that happened after the Dallas game. And there were some particularly choice quotes that I got from Brendan Hines-Ike, last one to get on the bus, last one out of the locker room, that I wanted to just drop in the audio of this because to me, the level of focus and seriousness that I heard from him, it's one thing to read the quotes. It's another thing to hear it in his voice.
Seemed like Brad had to step in there and get your back after a little bit of a rough interaction with one of the guys on the other team. What happened there?
It's Dallas, it's the way they play. It's physical, it's late, it's pesky, and it's what they've been told to do. You speak with some of the players and they're like, we're told to hit after plays all the time because we know that we can get under the skin and stuff. I think in that particular moment, I didn't see the play. I felt like it was normal how everything happened, but I think it was because the way I landed that it was a bit more physical and it was maybe a tough situation. But again, I didn't see it. I was still on the ground.
Do you see there being any kind of an advantage to the way that Open Cup, it's the next game, but it is a separate competition. It is a separate kind of mentality. Do you feel like that's going to help you guys lock in the way that you need to perform the way that you all seem to know that you can?
I mean, I think, and I was just saying this now, it's like, I don't believe in this momentum phase at this point of the season. I think even if we would have won the game tonight, you have to take Wednesday for what it is, and it is separate, a separate competition, but it's also a completely different game. whether it was a league game or Open Cup game, at this point of the year, we need to address each game as if it is the biggest game, because then when those big games come, you're prepared, right? And I think tonight was a really good chance for us to prepare that way, and we failed the test. We didn't address it as if it should be a must-win game. By the way, it's another derby loss for us this year, and we were aware of that. And so I think we have to be more cognizant of that going forward. Yes, we have a massive game on Wednesday, but what's going to come in 5-6 games when then the playoff starts, if we don't start to address these issues now with taking these games as serious as possible, with treating them like finals, treating them like they have to be must-win games. And when it comes time to playoffs, we're not going to have the readiness and experience. So it's about tuning things now while you have the chance, because once October comes, you're not going to have no chance.
Forgetting year-over-year results, year-over-year thinking about the cohesion in the locker room, how do you feel about the group that you've got and the chemistry that you've got going? Yeah. How have you felt about bouncing back from things like tonight as compared to some of the rougher times last season?
Yeah, well, we spoke about it now. I think we're a team that when we get comfortable, we're at our worst. And that's clear. We've won 2 or 3 times this year. We've won 2 games in a row. And then the third one or the fourth one, and it's a dreadful performance. It's not like, no, dreadful. So it's finding a way to be consistent at a higher level. And I think we're a team that we know that, but there's something about it that when we start to pick up points that we become very lackadaisical, very content, and you put out performances like that.
Knowing that your traveling fan contingent in Minnesota is going to be one of the bigger ones of the season, aside from them just showing up, what, if anything, do you think you guys can do to add to the energy that you can feed off of from those fans traveling all that way in the middle of the week?
For them, I think it's a similar scenario for many of us. Many of us haven't played in a semifinal Open Cup. We talked about after the game, I think there's only been 3 or 4 guys in that locker room who have been in those situations. As exciting it is for the fans, it's also an exciting opportunity for us, for players in our careers who haven't been in those types of situations. So there should be no shortage of energy. There should be no shortage of momentum in terms of not coming from game to game, but getting up for the game, right? There should be no shortage of that. So I think for the fans, I don't really want to put out a message, but it would be much better than it was tonight because those others happened.
If you guys win this one, then Ilya will have more Open Cup wins than many clubs have historically.
Okay.
How much has his perspective on playing an Open Cup and being in those deep Open Cup runs, how much has that played a factor in conversations that you guys have had in keeping your minds in the right place for it?
I think any player that's played in those types of games will say first and foremost that it's a different type of game, right? You have to prepare for doing all the little things much better. And it's not just about showing up and playing good football, but about doing the extra dirty work and covering the extra mileage and putting in the extra tackles, being first and second in all situations. And that was something I think, again, tonight we could have used as a rehearsal for it, and we missed out on that. So taking that forward, I think that's something that we're going to be very, very keen on and sharp on, is those little details of the game that we didn't get well tonight.
To me, characterizes the all business attitude that the guys showed up with in Minnesota. That does not sound like a guy you want to mess with, Phil. And Sure enough, on Wednesday night, messing with Brendan Hines-Ike or various Austin players, not a great idea. Some would say that crimes were perpetrated against the Loons. Strangely, none of the highlights are big on prosecuting these grave grievances of these horrible war crimes committed by various Austin FC players who they really did win it fair and square. And if people didn't like the officiating, I don't know that you've seen a U.S. Open Cup semifinal match recently.
We did have the 2nd minute foul on Owen Wolf that was not called a PK.
Yeah.
Again, that seems like that could have been reviewable. Of course, we don't get to ask questions of the refs for these U.S. Open Cup matches in the same way that we do for MLS matches. Again, it is kind of, your mileage may vary on those pro responses, depending on who the ref is, depending on how engaged they are, depending on how they are entertaining the questions from media, but we didn't even get that opportunity necessarily. Of course, yeah, there were some yellow cards, orange cards, what have you in that match. But again, with finals on the line, those are the stakes, and it can get a little bit chippy sometimes. And certainly we had some of that, but I think, again, pretty good game of soccer. I will continue to rail against extra time in soccer. I don't think it's terribly productive. I don't think it's terribly good, pretty soccer if you force tired players to play an extra 30 minutes. But in this case, it really worked out for Austin because, again, Brad Stuber, an excellent goalkeeper, but Dane St. Clair, also an excellent goalkeeper. And you really are just kind of dice rolling at that point when you were doing PKs, especially with some of the players who were left on the field. We did not get to learn which 5 were going to be selected, but was really curious to know with CJ Fodry if he was going to be one of the 5 takers. Nominally, he is one of the attackers that is on the field at that point, but also, he is quite young. He doesn't have a lot of first team minutes this year. And does he have the ice in his veins to step up to that moment? Again, he has scored 2 match winners in the past 3 weeks, and he is blacked out momentarily after scoring both of those.
You mentioned Dane St. Clair, and I want to say, yes, an all-star goalkeeper, excellent goalkeeper. Not as good on penalties as Brad Stuber, if you ask me.
Oh, okay.
That would have been interesting to see how that went, especially knowing that he was favoring his right leg coming out of their just previous match. It's something that it's lucky on his part that he was able to pop back up and stop that Mirto Zuni header that turned into the CJ Fodry rebound winning goal, because he was moving okay. But in those rare instances, when you get megged on a goal in the first half, I don't know that you're at 100%. Right. And especially if Estévez had a lineup of 5 guys picked that were going to really test his springiness in that weird alternate universe where it had gone to PKs, it would have been fascinating to see. And we may yet see such a thing happen between Austin and Minnesota before the end of the year because of the way that the playoff picture might end up playing out. But to me, the match, I'm glad that we recorded and dropped what we did when we did. I was very happy with the ways in which we were prescient about certain things. To me, the most delightful thing about it is that final sequence, starting with Diego Rubio, sending it up to John Gallagher, sending it into Mirto Zuni, who that was a solid header shot that only an excellent goalkeeper like Dane St. Clair stops, that CJ Fodry was there to come in clutch in the way that we've seen him do many times for the second team in the championship season for the second team. He is showing up now. I've said previously that he was definitely too good for Next Pro, but the minutes he was getting in MLS, he was not showing that he was at that first division level. And I think he's turned that corner for me at this point.
Yeah, me too.
At least as this kind of super sub. I want to see what he can do with some starts next season. And right. I think with the continued lack of availability of Brendan Vasquez, I think we're going to see that. I think he is more than earning those minutes where, regardless of what happens in the offseason, he knows the system, he knows this team, he plays well with everybody, he vibes well with everybody. I think he justifiably deserved to black out a little bit, if you ask me.
You've earned that. All right. Let's talk a little bit now about what lies ahead. We will talk about Seattle, of course, in the next match, but let's indulge a little and let's look ahead to Nashville and what this matchup might look like. Nashville SC, of course, was in the West at some points during Austin's entry into the league. So they were conference rivals. Of course, Nashville is now in the East. They're having one of their better seasons, but it's also a keenly competitive Eastern Conference. So even though on points they would probably prefer to be in the West, given the points that they have accumulated, shall we say.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff that I came up with looking at the table in the East, looking at what Nashville's recent run of form has been. I haven't watched all of their matches necessarily, but the East is a more competitive conference in terms of where they are in the table. They're currently 4th on 30 games played. The top 4 in the East have all played 30 games. Where it gets interesting is that just underneath Nashville, NYCFC have played 29 games and are on the same number of points. So they've got a game in hand on the same number of points.
Yep.
Miami is only 1 point behind them at 49 with 3 games in hand on Nashville. Columbus, also at 30 games, 49 points, a point behind them like Miami.
Yep.
Not the biggest, craziest threat. Orlando have a game in hand on Nashville and are on 48 points. Keep that in mind. Chicago in ninth, 42 points, 29 games played. Doesn't matter.
So basically Chicago and New York are fighting it out for ninth, but anywhere from, let's say 4 to 8, maybe even third, because Charlotte's got 30 games and they're on 53 points. It's going to be interesting to see who finishes where, who gets home field advantage, who doesn't get home field advantage.
So the reason I said Orlando is interesting.
Yes.
Guess who Nashville plays next?
Oh, okay.
Away at Orlando.
Oh boy. Okay.
They're playing away at Orlando tomorrow night, the night before Austin plays Seattle in Sunday Night Soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then they play Houston at home.
Orlando is a 7-4-3 record at home.
Yep.
Nashville has a 5-8-2 record on the road. A lot of their points have come because they are 10-2-3 at home. Austin is hosting the U.S. Open Cup final, as you may know.
Yeah. This Orlando match this weekend is going to directly affect, and I'm doing kind of an updated version of my what Austin's upcoming last opponents through the end of the regular season are facing article that I put up a few weeks ago. And this particular dynamic of what Nashville is looking at makes what they do in between now and that Open Cup final very interesting. Let's say that Orlando game does not go well for them. They really need to pick up those points against Houston at home. Houston, who maybe will have absolutely nothing to play for, or theoretically nothing to play for, or are just the agents of chaos they can be on the road when they play Nashville 4 days before that Open Cup final. How hard are they going to go if they really very much need to pick up those points because they want that preferred playoff seeding? Or frankly, like they are in fourth right now, but they don't have that X next to them. And if they lose against Orlando, they are chasing making sure that they actually make the playoffs because, again, Miami, multiple games in hand on them. NYCFC have a game in hand on the same points. Columbus are effectively right there even with them. They drop down into the play-in position, and that's not somewhere that you want to be in the East.
Right. Nashville probably makes the playoffs, but yeah, there is that possibility that they have to play the play-in game. By the way, after they play Austin in Open Cup, they are going on the road to Montreal, which, okay, that's probably a win, but there's no guarantee they win that. On decision day, they are going to host Miami.
So this is why, even though looking at things from the Austin perspective, looking at the Open Cup final, that Open Cup final, everybody in Austin wants that to be a win. Doesn't matter what happens between now and then. Doesn't matter what happens on the other side of it, frankly, as far as a lot of people are concerned. You bring home the oldest hardware in U.S. soccer competitions. A lot of people wouldn't even care if Austin missed the playoffs.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, look, some people are that hardcore about the Open Cup. To me, looking at the road from here to Open Cup, sure, it would be nice if Nashville can take that home. But if Austin is able to shut down Sam Surridge's ability to score hat tricks, and if Jacob Schaffelberg is not in great form as he has not been in great form, I see BJ Callahan, who does have a lot of Open Cup experience as an assistant. He has gone deep in this competition multiple times, should not be underestimated, but I just, at a certain point, they are going to have to accept which way the momentum is going in that game and consider the rest of their season, because they could be put into a very disadvantageous place just by what they decide to do on the other side of playing Austin and then having to go on the road 3 days later to Montreal.
Yeah.
Who, Montreal's Montreal, but as Austin saw, sometimes Montreal can be Montreal.
The other X factor in this, and this got mentioned on the post game in the Open Cup, which apparently you were not able to review now. But yeah, Nico Estévez and BJ Callahan know each other pretty well because they're both assistants in the U.S. programs. That's going to be, I think, a really interesting X factor in that too. He knows BJ a lot more than Eric Ramsey, right? So because they've coached together, so they know philosophies, they know styles, and these are, again, yeah, because of Nashville being in the West and Hani Mukhtar being as constant on the team. This is not an unknown quantity for some of the vets that are on the Austin team, especially Brad Stuber, who has saved a Hani Mukhtar penalty in his career.
Yes, he has. And I'll take us back to something that I said about that early season San Diego win. That was Nico Estévez coaching against the coach. Nico won that coach v coach. He knew Mikey Varas's moves. He knew where he was going. He knew what he would do. Granted, the next game against San Diego did not go as well. But crucially, in a cup final, the win is the win. You win that game, that's it. He will know BJ Callahan's instincts better than I think a lot of other coaches in the league, to your point.
Yeah. With Minnesota, as we saw Yeboah going out, that was an unexpected surprise in the bad way for Minnesota. And I think that definitely had a factor on the game because they didn't really have a true striker to fill in at that point because, of course, Olashue is now off to Villarreal and the person that they brought in has already played in the Open Cup for Hartford. So he was not able to get into the game. So they had to do what they've done sometimes and have Robin Lod play up and then Bongi eventually played up with striker. But I think you could still make a case that Estévez outcoached Ramsey in that game, matching a back five with a back five. Some have called it a 3-4-3, but essentially the same sort of thing, right? You have two wing backs, you have three center backs.
That was a coach studying, and like we saw a progressive bend in the way that Nico worked against what Eric has been doing at Minnesota all season, where first game loss, second game draw, third game match the opponent like a mirror, and it worked using the same kind of tactics against Eric's system, ended up breaking Eric's system, it breaking through at least, even though the two teams were very evenly matched the entire time. That's what I'm seeing, and I hope that we continue to see more data to bear it out because I love it when Nico makes me look like a genius. Like I see him making those kinds of progressive moves where he's like, okay, well, you learn more from a loss than a win, and who survives at the end of the season, that is MLS. MLS is an attrition-based survival horror game. If Nico's able to stay alive and keep most of his players healthy, with the exception of the one out with an ACL tear, then that's how you make it deep into the postseason. And I don't know. I think that it is not too optimistic to think based off of what we have seen in terms of progress, what we've seen in terms of growing cohesion where it wasn't earlier in the season, that especially off of the fumes of a theoretical US Open Cup final win, that really could propel Austin into a very interesting playoffs.
Yeah. And of course, after that Open Cup game, Austin hosts St. Louis 3 days later, which is the easiest remaining game on their schedule. Oh, and Nico did call himself a genius at one point in the press conference, right? He was joking. He was joking. He was very jovial, but he did go there, which was fun to see.
Yeah, it was nice. He was being asked about CJ and what do you think about him as a super sub? And he said, well, I'm a genius. Very plain spoken. It was really delightful to get to see him be able to unclench a bit and enjoy it and relish it. And I mean, you were not the only person, myself included, honestly, who looked at that lineup and went, that is not what I expected. And I expected something unexpected, but it was yet more unexpected than what I had prepared myself for. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then as I saw it working, I was like, okay, I'm going to trust the process. Yeah. And that's why I asked him a question about how vindicated he feels. And I specifically talked about that final sequence that led to the winning goal, and just seeing him light up where it was like, yes, that is the thing that we have been trying to execute on all season. And it worked, and it worked beautifully. There was no way to predict it, but that's the way that they have been trying to put this stuff together.
There was a lot of head scratching about Cascante, but we saw him high kick stab a ball out of the air at some point. Maybe one of the greatest defensive plays he's ever had.
on the topic of vindication, hey, I said it on the podcast. I said I would love nothing more than for there to be a Julio Cascante redemption narrative. He really showed the hell up. He showed up and he put it right in the face of his critics, myself included, who were like, dude is just not executing well enough. And in the post-game presser, Nico said, yeah, no, Julio played well against Minnesota the last time. And I was like, there you go. That's why you start a Julio Cascante who's got something to prove.
Steph Conrola, you are vindicated for now.
Do we want to talk Seattle?
We do, yeah. And I am going up on Saturday morning right after we put this podcast up with a 3 questions with Jeremiah Sean, of course, from the Excellent Sounder at Heart. Talk to him a little bit in particular about Jesus Ferreira, who has been not the best for Seattle, but does a lot of things. They're pretty satisfied, according to Jeremiah. He has gotten to double-digit goal contributions finally. And of course, he's been a monster at Q2. Of course, that being in a Dallas uniform, but still, he is not a welcome, pleasant sight for a lot of Boston fans. Weird to see him in Ray of Green rather than, Dallas red, white, and blue, but still, I expect him to be pretty pivotal in this match. And again, Seattle did not have to play 120 minutes on Wednesday, but they did play against Miami on Tuesday. Last time we saw Seattle and Miami play before that, Seattle absolutely outclassed Miami.
And this was the direct inverse of that. It was a spanking loss where Miami made them look like youth level players playing against professionals. And this is soccer, right? Sometimes you can have literally the exact same opponents play each other and all of the dynamics are reversed. Here's the thing is in between that Leagues Cup win and that loss against Miami, you know what they did? They drew 2-2 against LA Galaxy. And I feel like that may have been a thing that had bearing on that Miami loss. When you draw against the bottom team in the league that are having a legendarily bad season, that does something to your mentality, especially if the worst team in the league is making you really kill yourself just to draw them when you are still chasing points for the playoff race. Seattle wants favorable positioning, and to not pick up 3 points against LA Galaxy and then drop all points against Miami. Now, what are they looking at?
Yeah, because they would certainly rather be at home in a 4-5 series against LAFC, which they would be if the playoffs ended today. But they are in 5th with 29 games played, 45 points. LAFC has game in hand, 28 games played, 47 points. So LAFC is in a pretty advantageous position. And it could even be that they maybe overtake Vancouver even. Vancouver still got 5 points on them. So that's going to be tough sledding. But Seattle to have to go 2 of 3 on the road against LAFC or Vancouver is probably not a prospect that they want to face, but that's what they're looking at right now. So that does concern me a little bit because I do think that they will be gunning for wins and they might see playing a tired from Open Cup victory Austin as a very winnable game and might game plan accordingly. And Schmetzer, of course, an excellent coach, very mindful of what it takes to win in the league, what it takes to win competitions. It's a cohesive top to bottom lineup. There's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to fear about this. This is not going to be an easy one, even though it is a home game.
It's not going to be an easy one. And it's also the sort of thing that I don't see Nico Estévez or his team wanting to come back home and deliver a loss to home fans that are high on the fumes of that semifinal win. And look, they rested Dubrsarski, they rested Taylor, they rested O'Brien. All 3 of them have something to prove. All 3 of them did not get to play in that Open Cup semifinal. So that's something to consider. The second team playing tonight, as we record this on Friday, they are chasing playoffs of their own. I don't know that any of the theoretical call-up prospects from the second team are going to be major reinforcements for Sunday night necessarily, but who knows? Maybe we see a Riley Thomas, maybe we see an Irvin Torres. It's entirely possible. But back on Seattle, they're facing some interesting stuff of their own. So back to what we were looking at on the table, they are in, strangely, a very Nashville-like position where a whole lot is determined by their next stretch of games. So on the other side of the Sunday night soccer game, they play Vancouver at home. After that, they play Portland at home, Cascadia Derby. A week after that, they play RSL at home, and then they go on the road to play NYCFC on decision day.
Oh, that's weird.
This is really, so here's what makes it even weirder, Phil. I looked at what Vancouver's remaining schedule looks like. You mentioned that Vancouver could be overtaken by LAFC. I think it's totally possible. At the same time, Vancouver is supercharged by Mueller time, and LAFC is on Son Standard time now. They are both cooking with their new DPs. I think there are too many variables to really make any kind of a call about what the back chunk of the season for either of those teams looks like. But here's the thing. The day before Austin won that semifinal, know what Vancouver did? They beat Hamilton Forge 4-0. So on October 1st, they are playing the Canadian Cup final against Vancouver FC.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So before they get there, they go on the road this weekend to SKC, and then they play Portland at home before 3 days later playing Seattle away. And then, like I said, on October 1st against Vancouver FC, 4 days after that, they play the Quakes.
Okay.
6 days after that, away at Orlando, decision day at home against FC Dallas.
Okay.
Both they and LAFC have the same number of games in hand, and they have similarly annoyingly punishing schedules.
Right.
So if you're Schmetzer and you know that you are playing a Vancouver that has a tough schedule at home in the notoriously fortress-like Lumen Field, what decisions are you making? Layer on top of that, Portland the weekend after. Portland, who schedule-wise, let me pull that up, this weekend are away at Houston. Like I said, they're away at Vancouver 4 days after that. And then 3 days after that, they play Dallas at home. And then they have a little bit of rest before playing Seattle away. And then, of course, decision day, they get lucky them, they get to host San Diego. If you're Seattle and you're chasing points and you want to be top four, if not solidly up near the top of the standings, what kinds of choices do you make if you're Brian Schmetzer? Do you rotate slightly in your one away fixture before having 3 weeks straight at home without as complicated of a schedule as various of your opponents do? That's where my head's at, is I feel like I can set my watch by the decisions that Brian makes. Honestly, like, he's kind of predictable in the good way. He's very pragmatic, but I don't know. What do you do when you have exactly 4 fixtures left after this one on Sunday?
Right.
How much do you gamble?
Here's the other weird thing. So San Diego and Minnesota are both ahead of Vancouver, LAFC, and Seattle, right?
Yep.
But they've played 30 games each. San Diego has 56 points. Minnesota has 54 points. Let's say, just for fun, let's just take out the games in hand that Vancouver and LAFC have, and let's just say that they win both of those and get the 6 points. So you've got all those teams, let's say, on 30 games with those results. Vancouver would be first with 58. Then you'd have San Diego with 56, Minnesota with 54, and then LAFC, who has 47 now, would be on 53. So there could be some shifts in the top 4. Seattle obviously is wanting to break into that top 4, but it gets real complicated just because of, and if Seattle won a game in hand, they would only be at 48 points with those 30 games played. So getting into the top 4 is going to be really difficult for Seattle, I think. It's still mathematically possible. They can certainly do it, but there's such a cluster up at the top that is, again, with that game in hand that LAFC has, a rung below, similar to the padding that Austin has above Colorado right now for 7th.
Yeah, the next This weekend is going to determine some stuff, and it could shake stuff up just one more game, but it's going to get even more complicated getting into midweek next week. That's what I'm fascinated to see is what happens in that Vancouver Portland game. What happens when Seattle plays Portland a week after that? It's there. I'll put it this way: by the time we get to the weekend following the U.S. Open Cup final, that Austin better win, that Austin can win, that Austin ought to win because of the intangibles. To borrow something the people in Morning Footy said yesterday morning, Austin, Mike LaHood specifically said this.
Okay.
Austin has so many of those intangibles going for it. It'll be fascinating to see what the overall playoff race looks like going into the weekend of the October 4th games. That's going to be absolutely fascinating because the top four in the West, I think, could look radically different. They could, shockingly, look radically the same.
So you're on Cascadia watch, basically.
It's Cascadia watch. Cascadia is going to determine more about the final Western Conference standings than is often the case, and it's going to make those games incredible to watch.
Yeah.
More so.
Those are already fun. Those are already fun rivalries, and it's going to be so much more fun. All right. Anything else that we want to hit on this or anything else?
Not that I can think of that is too super urgent or important. But since Austin plays on Sunday and we'll be dropping this Saturday morning, I would say for the Austin interested playoff hunt looking people, I would say take a gander at LAFC. Delivered Son Heung-min his first MLS hat trick playing against RSL. And now RSL have to play them again this weekend. So who knows? Maybe RSL can flip the script on them. That'll be interesting to watch. Definitely watch Nashville away at Orlando. I think you also want to watch Vancouver away at SKC for fun. And I think 3 games is enough.
Are you rooting for Houston over Portland?
When would I ever root for Houston, Phil?
When they're playing Portland?
Having Houston strip Portland of points is definitely what you want. The table math is pretty easy in a few respects like that. Like, you want to see Houston bleed points off of them.
I mean, a draw works because an Austin win plus a Portland draw gets Austin into 6th.
Yeah, that would work for me. I would not hate seeing RSL draw LAFC or take all 3 points against LAFC.
Sure.
That wouldn't be bad.
That does get Salt Lake into the playoff mix, possibly, depending on what Colorado and San Jose do.
Yeah, and I would rather see Salt Lake dueling San Jose for the bottom of the play-in standings. I would like to see the contentious table fight in the West happen underneath Austin and not make things quite as tense for just how low of a spot Austin's going to be stuck with, because other teams are way more worried about their remaining schedules.
Maybe the top 4 boat for Austin has already set sail, leaving Austin on the dock. But again, depending on how the top 4 shakes out, 5th or 6th, that could be advantageous, that could not. It's gonna be really hard to tell. You could end up with a better fundamental team overall in 4th or 3rd than 1st or 2nd when this all shakes out. It's going to be an interesting few weeks for sure.
Yeah, I think at this point, as much as 4th would be nice and 4th objectively might look good, 5th might be just as good as 4th, frankly, because of who might end up in that 4th spot. I don't think that's going to end up being San Diego or Vancouver, who would kind of terrify me in a first round matchup. And I would rather see them grind through 3 games before seeing either one of them in a following round of the playoffs.
It's going to be Minnesota, isn't it?
I feel like it's going to be Minnesota. If I were calling it right now, it just feels like Austin is destined to face Minnesota in the first round of the playoffs, which will be interesting story-wise for incredibly obvious reasons. For Austin's many war crimes in the midweek U.S. Open Cup semifinal that Minnesota only managed to fill a third full.
Right. We know now that Austin can beat Minnesota on the road.
We sure do.
All right, so we're going to leave it there, I think. Have a good week. Enjoy your Saturday watching other teams. And then, of course, enjoy your Sunday over at Q2 watching Austin play a team that once beat us with 5 teenagers, but we won't talk about that ever again, right?
Except for right now.
Except for right now.
This is the best thing I've heard in the history of the 8 years I've been on this planet.